Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Well, hi, everyone. This is Michael Rochelle again, Chief Strategy Officer from the Brandon Hall Group. And I'm lucky enough to catch up today with Luke Owings, who's the VP of Product from a great company called Abilite. Luke, can you jump in and tell us a little bit more about yourself and the company?
Absolutely, Michael. Good to be here. I'm Luke Owings. As you said, I am the VP of Product at Abilite, where I get to develop all of our experiential learning modules. I get to develop our new simulations, and I get to develop the programs we build to support Fortune 5,000 companies with their new hire, with their manager, and their director and executive development programs. And so I, as a history, started out my career in the consulting world, moved over to the education world when I started teaching and fell in love 15 years ago, and have done just about every job you could since there. I helped build McKinsey Academy for the consulting firm and helped them build their education, learning, and development for clients. I ran an L&D department at about a 500-person company. And for the last 5 years, I've been building my own products that we deploy for our enterprise clients. So it's been a pleasure. And throughout that whole time, I've had the opportunity to do a little bit with Brandon Hall. So I'm excited to be here with you, Michael, and talk to you about some of the cool new things we're building and some of the cool things we're seeing in the field. It's a wild, wild time.
Yeah, I mean, when we got a chance to connect and do this podcast, I was really intrigued by the topic, leadership, development, Reimagined with AI, and your latest offering, this AI cases. So I think our audience is going to find it super cool to learn about that.
Absolutely.
So let's start from the beginning. Let's do the basics. Now, what does Abilite do, and how does AI fit into the picture?
Yeah, absolutely. So at our core, we build leadership development programs for our clients, right? And our clients would be the Fortune 5,000 that you would think of, the biggest consulting firms, the biggest law firms, the biggest CPG and technology firms in the world, where we help support them on their learning and development at key moments in their employees' life cycle. So whether that's new hire training and helping them build the basic skills they need for that, whether that's new manager training, where we're actually helping them understand, hey, how to step into the role of a manager and helping their cohorts come together on that, or whether that's starting to be a leader of leaders and starting to be a director level. We support our clients on that. And to do that, we build learning programs. We build learning programs that are at their core simulation-based and experiential. So we strongly believe in the principles of adult learning, that having an opportunity to practice, having an opportunity to reinforce and try again, having the opportunity to immerse yourself into a new role, into a new identity, and try out new tools is the way to do it. And we believe that happens best in a social environment. And so what we do at our core, and as the product lead here, is we build programs that have as part of them simulation-based learning that really allows people to come together, step into a new role, and learn the tools, mindsets, and skills to be successful in that role. And again, that's with some of the biggest companies in the world. And we feel very privileged to have the opportunity to work with them.
Well, it's interesting. And I think to bring it home for the audience, maybe you can share a great story, or a moment where you've seen AI effectively used in leadership development, because it's pretty new, for folks that are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anyone who's on this podcast, who's listening to this podcast, probably knows two things about AI. One, the future is AI, and everybody's experimenting with it, and everybody's trying it out. And you're probably on LinkedIn if you're on this podcast. And so your feed is probably both full of posts about AI and posts created by AI. And the slop is real and it's going out. So one, you probably know the future of AI is real. And two, you probably, if you're like me, feel a little bit of AI vertigo, where it's changing so fast. Things are happening so fast. It's almost hard to keep track. Sometimes I look back 6 months and I'm like, holy cow, what was hard is now easy. What was impossible is now Tuesday. And it's this really crazy environment that we're in with AI. And so with that context, and you asked some interesting things I'm seeing about AI, you know, we know we have to be on the forefront of that. We know we have to be trying out new things. We know we just, as learning and development professionals, got access to the most powerful, coolest, fastest moving new tool we've ever had. And from here, from us at Ability, our frame for looking at that is great. And let's not fall in love with the tool. Let's fall in love with the learning that it enables. And let's fall in love with what it allows us to do that we couldn't do before. And so I'll give you one use case, which is where you started before I went off on my soliloquy, if you will, Michael. But let me give you one use case, which is we found AI to be one of the most tremendous tools possible to replace the role play, right? Manager trainings for decades and decades have had at their core the role play. The role play where you take on a role as a manager, a partner takes on the role as some type of employee, maybe a difficult employee who needs feedback, maybe an employee who's getting a raise and you want to practice it. And from time immemorial, they've had problems. One of the people's not into it. One person jumps out and is like, I don't even know how to play this role. One of the people decides, hey, this is just not for me, and they check out. The feedback after it is weak. Someone says, hey, you did a good job. And then they walk away and say, I wish I never had to do that again. AI is for the first time, a tool that can actually mimic that and become a tireless and earnest role play partner in a way that's engaging and effective from a learning side. And so we've built our own set of ways of replacing those in our program, replacing role plays with AI conversations. And those AI conversations, when designed well and created well, do absolutely magical things. They create an engaging environment for a learner to step into a role and try out skills. They give the first level of superficial feedback to that learner about what they did well and what they could have done better. They also take the opportunity to give a learner to actually intentionally step into how they want to go at this, strategize, think about what they want to do. And if kind of pedagogically sound and pedagogically put into the program right, they become this incredibly powerful learning tool that we never had before. And so that's one example, and I can go into like details from the pedagogy side, I can go into details of the program side, but I will say AI is incredible. It's the future. It's crazy to keep up with it right now. And even as we keep up with it right now, it's really important to keep AI as a tool that supports learning, not learners as a tool that supports AI.
So let's talk AI cases. This is pretty intriguing. This is a relatively new offering for you, right?
That's right. We had our hard launch a month and a half ago.
So let's go through the high points, and then I got a couple more questions to follow up on that. So tell us about AI cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started from the perspective of, hey, a role play could be a really powerful tool here, like I just talked about from an AI side. We also came from the perspective that there's this opportunity to up level what historically would have been called Harvard Business School cases. They set up a situation, they have a protagonist, they have a decision that's there, and then they let people discuss it. And we said, well, what if we married those two things? Then we actually could create an opportunity for a better case study environment that actually has you talking to one of the protagonists, that has you navigate the thing that they're doing, as opposed to just discussing and analyzing. So we started from there. And what we did is we built out a series of 24 cases. We built the world around it. We built the case around it. We built the decision and the personas in which you would interact there. And we housed everything around this idea of how do you, as a leader, as a manager, as a finance expert, step into a role, deal with a protagonist, actually make a decision and navigate it throughout. And so we built them as these 30-minute experiences for a learner to step into a role, get immersed in a world, have a conversation with a protagonist in that world, navigate a situation, get feedback on it, and then reflect and go for it. That's what we built. What we then started learning is that, hey, this is a really powerful individual tool, and it really gets amplified and takes off when we do it in group sessions. When you do one of these conversations and then talk to a partner about it. When you and a partner look at how you navigated that conversation and then talk to a cohort of 30 about how everybody navigated that conversation. And so what we ended up deploying and what we've ended up doing with a lot of our clients is 1 to 2 hour sessions that basically recreate the case study experience. They recreate the case study experience by putting you in that role, by letting you practice it, by letting you discuss it, and letting you go for it.
So I'm talking learning and development leaders, right? When I'm thinking AI cases. So what have they told you that makes it super special for them? And what are the
Yeah.
major use cases are they bringing to your attention for AI cases?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been really interesting. So, learning and development leaders are always, always, always trying to get things that are practical, that are able to be deployed and applied very fast, right? And so, a tool that is based around practice has a lot of appeal to them. Another thing that we hear from learning and development leaders all the time is, how do I make sure that what an individual learner is going through is personalized to them? Right? It's personalized in terms of the experience they're having, and it's personalized in terms of the feedback and guidance that they get. AI is the most, bar none, the most powerful, scalable, cheapest tool that we've ever had to do that. Historically, in the past, you had to have a coach sit there, watch a conversation, give feedback. And indubitably, the feedback would be something like, I noticed you said guys there, maybe say something else more inclusive. What the AI does is it not only does that, but it says, hey, in this situation, it looked like you were dealing with the protagonist and trying to anticipate her needs. Great. You said this phrase. You could instead say this phrase. So the personalized nature of the interaction and the personalized nature of the analysis, I think, is really resonating with a lot of learning and development leaders. And then the last thing I'd say, if I'd say practical and I'd say, okay, making sure it's personalized, I'd say that learning and development leaders are really still being asked to do a lot, where they bring cohorts together and create a really immersive, really incredible experience. And AI enables that in so many ways. And that's what we do with our live cases. And that's why a lot of our clients are both using our programs that integrate those cases on the whole, but then also grabbing our cases and integrating it into their own environment, which is really interesting.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. So clearly, your organization is way ahead of the game and has approached the curve and gone past it on doing this. But it's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this to say, hey, I'm just getting started or just starting to think about exploring leadership development that incorporates AI. So, like, what advice would you give them? And with all the time and resource constraints that are out there with L&D professionals, where should they focus their efforts initially? Like, what's the priority here?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a really interesting question because there's just so much out there, right? And there's just so much, and kind of cutting through the morass is its own thing. I think the first thing I would say is something I said a little bit earlier, which is, no matter what, focus on the learning, don't focus on the tool. There are more tools out there that are amazing, that will demo well, that will wow you in terms of, wow, I'm talking to an avatar. Wow, it's a voice thing. Wow, it's this. Don't start there. Start with, what is the learning I'm trying to have? What is the learner experience I'm trying to have? And how am I trying to help them be better at their job? Right. And so I think that is the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, and Michael, you've been around the L&D space for a long time too, probably even longer than me. I don't know. It's possible here. But there's this whole thing about, there's this tempting push, and it's happened forever, toward asynchronous, toward, hey, someone can do it on their own whenever they want. Hey, they can log in and do whatever they want, and they can do whatever they've got to do. And what we've seen over the last decades, when the internet came out, when all these huge catalogs came out, the LinkedIn Learnings of the world, which, by the way, are amazing with the amount of content they have. And we're seeing the same thing with AI, that there's this tempting thing to say, we're going to give you asynchronous tools, and then you're just going to use them, and learners are going to go and do those. And the truth is that that's not really how great learning happens, right? There are things that asynchronous does well on demand. If I need to learn how to do a pivot table, it's really great to have LinkedIn Learning so I can go on and do that. If I'm trying to learn how to change my identity and step into a new role as a manager, watching a LinkedIn Learning video on how to give feedback isn't going to get me there. And so what I would say is, as you're doing these and as you're looking at AI, don't forget that social, that culture you're building, that way you're helping individuals take jumps of mindset, sometimes just has to happen as a community. And that community is important. And I think we have a very different perspective than a lot of the other tools that are coming out there because we believe that at our core. But it is bringing people together, having them have a common experience, and using the AI to amplify that instead of trying to make the AI replace that, I personally think is a better path for human learners. I don't know, in 10 years when there's AI employees at organizations, if it's going to be the best path for AI employees. So don't quote me there. But for the humans who run our organizations, for the humans who we are responsible for helping grow, social, community, common experiences matter. And AI is an incredible amplifier of that.
You know, it's interesting when we kind of look at where people are with AI in terms of learning or leadership development. It's interesting what their reactions are. And I wanted to do like a quick segue on another issue is they come back to us and talk about governance. They say, I've got to understand how to bring this into the building properly. You know, it sounds really cool, but I got to make sure that it's used right and the right intentions with it and the right intended purposes with it.
Yeah.
So when you're considering this, you know, the getting back to first things first and what do I do first, like, how do you make sure you got that right? What are the couple steps that you need to do to make sure you bring it into the building properly?
Oh my gosh, this is an incredibly challenging thing, right? This idea of governance, this idea of safety, this idea of security, this idea of data security, it's more complicated than it's ever been in the world of AI. And I'll give you a few examples and where it goes. It's more complicated than ever with international organizations. When you have cross borders, you have to think about things like, okay, where are people actually dialing in from? What is the local regulation and how is that local regulation changing? Europe, not surprisingly, is at a different place than the US on this. And, you know, because of that, we have to think about, hey, what's going on in the different places? And so to deal with that, first and foremost, I think that there are some certifications that are coming up that are really thoughtful and that are helpful and that are globally recognized. Obviously, there's the SOC 2, which everybody knows and thinks about, but there's a whole set of other ones that are coming around for AI that actually help us understand what good data security looks like. And this is a society conversation. The second thing that's super interesting about AI is it is a more open-ended conversation between learners and this tool that's happening in new ways. And that leads to risks in other fronts. It leads to risk in terms of things like bias showing up, in terms of bad behavior showing up in interactions with AI. And it leads to risks in terms of, hey, what if people put in trade secrets? What if you're working with Coca-Cola and one of the people doing an AI interaction decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to put in the Coca-Cola formula right here. Well, if you're Coke, you probably don't want that to happen because that data is being stored somewhere else and going somewhere else. It sounds like a silly example, but these are what lawyers are absolutely thinking about at big companies. And so I would say one is on the bias and the challenges of people going outside of simulation environments. I would say that there are some good tools out there, and we lean on Azure. We lean on some of the tools that come out that say, hey, if it shows any issues that would be an HR issue from the perspective of sexism, racism, things like that, then we have guardrails that stop things. Doesn't stop everything. And so we actually also audit the interactions with AI on a regular basis to make sure things aren't going awry. On the topic of whether someone's putting in trade secrets, I think it's a really hard thing, particularly with the advent of all these tools that are like, hey, you can create your own environment and then talk in the AI as if it's like your real world. It's why we actively chose the decision to actually create our own worlds, which are not the real world that a new manager at Coke is going through, but a world that rhymes with it, that's applicable to it, but doesn't have the deep issues of, hey, are they actually going to then talk about what happens at Coke and it's going to go the wrong way? Whether that's right or wrong, it releases the risk from us and it releases the risk from our clients. And so there's this point of data security and cross borders. There's this point of what's safe in terms of talking back and forth, in terms of privacy and talking about things like Coke and all that. And that's where we made these choices. At the end of the day, though, I think we're all trying to figure out what safety and security means in this world. And so I urge you, with any vendor you're talking to have that as an upfront conversation. How are they auditing things? How do they know what actually gets said and what actually gets fed to the data? Do they know where your data sits? Do they know who has access to it from the admin side? Do they know where all this stuff is happening? And it's a brave new world out there, Michael.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on a couple things that we often talk about, as well as when you're talking to providers, what level of transparency and explainability are they offering to? What assurances are they making that this thing doesn't jump the tracks or go from the pavement to the dirt road? And
right.
Making sure that it's a consistent, sustainable, reproducible process. But this is kind of a hard question to ask you, because it's like the product roadmap of the future for the thing that is the near future. But you're working
That's
on
right.
a lot of great stuff already. AI cases sounds really interesting, but have you seen beyond that? Like, where do you see it all evolving inside your shop?
Well, it's a great question. And right now I'm trying to get through Thursday. So it's my Thursday here. We think about it in a lot of different ways. One is we think about how the technology is going to enable different types of interactions that are not possible right now. So I'll tell you right now, a lot of our AI cases are text-based. And that's actually a really positive thing that we have. And it does a lot of good things for auditability. It does a lot of good things for ESL learners. It does a lot of good things for pedagogically, like slowing down system 1 versus system 2. And I can go into that. But we are interested in, as the technology evolves, what becomes possible. We do think that there's something to low latency voice and low latency actually mimicking having a conversation that has the robustness of, hey, I can see your face. Hey, I can see where you look up. I can see where you smile. I can see you nodding back at me at this moment. And I think AI is going to enable that to be accessible on a broader scale over the next 3 years, right? Next 3 to 5 years, that's going to be there. It's not there yet. We're not going to develop the technology, but the technology is moving fast enough to do. So one is, I think you'll continue to see incremental improvements in the technology, which will unlock new learning use cases. The second thing, and this is where it's so much more fuzzy, is that, it's going to start shifting how organizations themselves work. Right now, you see the first wave of, hey, let's teach people how to use AI. And really, it's like, okay, go into ChatGPT and learn that you can actually instructionally design with it. And even the companies that have put a wrapper on that and said, hey, you can develop so many different AI courses off the nothing. And learning designers are like, oh my God, this is amazing. And now they're developing way too much and a lot of it's shit. And then it's going to all go downhill and we'll see what happens. But in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see AI change how organizations work. And that is where I think some of the actual learning that we actually have to help learners have will change. That's where our shift of programs will probably shift to where it's not just managing people, but it's managing AI and managing systems, where it's not just, hey, how do you actually do a 5 whys problem solving when you're stepping in with something that went wrong, but how do you use AI to actually look deeply into a system to see what's going right and what's going wrong? And so I think we're at the cusp of the skills that people need to have shifting and changing as organizations change and as jobs change. And so our commitment as Ability is, first of all, to keep up with the incremental tech things and say, what are the new things that allow us to do the same learning we've done in the past in a more robust way? What are the things that allow us to do it in a cheaper, more accessible, more personalized, still communal way? And that's where the first step is. But the later step is us keeping an eye on, how does this change jobs? How does this change organizations? And how does this change the taxonomy of what a middle manager does, which, by the way, has been relatively steady for decades now? How is that change in 5 years. And so that's what we're keeping our eye on. And that's what we're committed to supporting our clients in terms of building.
Luke, that's a lot of information, but so valuable for so many different reasons. I think our audience will be mining this podcast for quite some time. And it sounds like we could have talked about this forever. Love your passion, love your commitment, love where the vision that, you shared. And I think you made it very practical for people to say that this is not out of reach. You can do this today. Like you said, it's Thursday. You can do this by the end of today and have an immediate impact. So I want to thank you for joining and thank our audience as well. And it's Ability with an E, as I point out to people.
That's
so
right.
Please check it out. And I'm sure this won't be the last time we get a chance to catch up. Look forward to some of those updates that you were alluding to, and we'll talk about it on a future podcast. So this is Michael
Absolutely.
Rochelle signing off with Luke Owings from Ability, and we hope to have a chance to chat with you the next time.
Thanks for having me.